All right, guys, you're welcome to the Soft Sport Podcast. My name is Sasa P, and as usual, I've got my brothers here. I've got Handy and Mr. Fairplay, also known as Ever Sam. So today, I come with good news. The good news is, if you haven't subscribed to this channel, please make sure you do so. Right here, we talk about everything sports, from football to MMA to boxing. Guy, if you want the best sport content, follow Soft Sports on all our platforms. You like, you share, and then you keep it engaging. You get in the comment section, okay? Today on the podcast, bro, last time it was funny. We started like clowns, just joked here and there. But today is serious business. What we'll be talking about today involves money and football transfers, okay? How do you know the value of a football player? I know there are different factors, but I'll start with you, Andy. Just tell me, how do you get to that stage where you say, okay, this player, this is the value for this player, and why?
First off, I think, like every player, every club values their own player like individually. Like each club has a value that they place on their own players, right? Like that this is how much we value this player. Then the transfer market right now, they have their own value that they place on the player based on its relevance, the amount of people that come just to watch that particular player play, not just that, but just his team, but and there you have journalists too that whenever they talk about a player, they can keep talking about a particular player, and the more they talk about the player, the more the player's value goes up, and every good performances that particular player puts in, it increases its value, and once the eyes of the press, are on you, I feel like it can easily just skyrocket your value. And I'm I'm going to use a player, for instance, Benjamin Sesko. He's been a young player that has been talented, being talked about a whole lot lately. Leipzig got him for a good fee. And for about 2 years, he's been consistent with the price tag of him being valued around 100 million. That's the value they placed on him. It doesn't necessarily mean that his form, because his form, I think he dipped a little bit this last season, but the entire club too had, they didn't have a good season overall. But they still see the value of the player based on the age too, which is very important because you cannot value a player like Luka Modric, who is in the end of his career, or Ronaldo Cristiano, at a very high value when you're comparing them with maybe Franco Mastertuano, that's the player that Real Madrid signed, because you're looking at the age, that age factor comes into play a lot, like Benjamin Sesko. So I think all of these factors come into play, but most importantly, I think the journalists, the press, are the ones that really push it out
Okay.
there, a narrative,
All right.
because in comparison to our African players, that's what I was heading to. In comparison to our African players, I don't think the way the value European players or South American players or players that are already playing their trades in these European clubs, the way they are being valued, I don't think in comparison to most African players or players in Africa that the values
We'll
are
get
aligned.
we'll get to the comparison shortly. Thank you very much for that. I've heard your perspective. You've said some things, but there's something you didn't say, and let me see if Mr. Fairplay will say that. So, how do you value a player?
Well, I think first of all, it starts with the player's talents. For you to be a footballer, first of all, you need to have the talent. And so when people look at the talents, what your abilities can do for their team, it helps in placing a certain value on you. And then as time goes on, different things come to play. Just like Andy said, age is a factor. The way you value a player who is entering his prime is different from the way you value a player who has passed his or her prime. So you begin to consider the age, you consider the player's injury history. There are players that are very good, but they've had a very difficult issue with injuries. And so sometimes players like that, their value drops a little bit. We also have international experiences. You've how many games you've played for your international teams, what have you achieved. Players' achievement as well is also key. I mean, if you want to buy a player from clubs with huge achievement. You want to buy a Vinicius, you want to buy a Yamal. You look at what they have achieved. They've won trophies. So you can't necessarily entice such players with trophies because they've won trophies. So the values of those players are very high because if you're getting them, you're not getting them just because of trophies. There must be something else. And then there's also the media, like Andy said. These days clubs use media. There are some clubs, there are some agents that will use the media to increase the value of their player, give the player coverage, give the player certain things that we all know the player don't really do, but you just want to. Some will create a YouTube channel, some will create a Twitter channel just to promote, that player's value every single day, statistics about the player's ability. And then there's also the player's potential. The player can be young, but the potential you've seen in the player gives you a certain impression that in the next 3, 4, 5 years, this player is going to be at the top of his career. He's going to be competing with the best set of players. There's also contracts. The length of a player's contract also determines the player's value. If you have 1 year left in your contract, there's every possibility that club that will come in for you have it in the back of their mind that you just have 1 year. So if you don't sell this player, you might lose this player for free. So the value of that player drops. But if a player just signs a 4 or 5 years contract, you know that I still have enough time to keep this player. So the value of that player at that time increases. And then there's also endorsements. Some of these players already have endorsements. So if you are signing a player with that level of endorsement, the value of that player is always very, very high. This player has a strong social media fan base where once singles, you sign the player this January and the next 6 months, the merchandise that must have been sold because of that player is crazy. So when you put all these things together, it can actually increase the value of a player or reduce the value of the player.
Hmm. Sounded like a lecturer there, but that was nice.
Mm.
That was nice. Actually,
They're very
yeah,
educative.
he said something that you didn't touch. Of course, there are a lot of factors involved. You talked about so many things, but he identified one thing, which to me, that's the number one thing. You
The
talk about
talent of the
talent,
player. Yeah.
ability. I think that's the word. Ability, not even talent. Ability of the player. You look at what people need these days. It came to a time in football where traditional center forwards were not sought after. People were looking for false
Yeah.
nine. And now, after the emergence of Holland, we are getting to see, more 6 foot plus strikers being wanted in the
Mm.
market. So that certain level of ability is in high demand. And that's why we see players like that go for a very huge fee. And it gets to a certain point where is fullbacks, maybe goalkeepers, ball playing goalkeepers, or what's it called? Deep playmaking defensive midfielders, or the Kante kind of defensive midfielder. So it changes. But
Yeah.
you guys have all spoken well, and it's true. At the same time, there's still some controversies attached to this. Handy, you were going somewhere talking about comparing different regions. You talked about Africa, you talked about South America, you try to compare it to Europe. Some players from Europe tend to have more value than players from Africa. Why is that? I don't know. Of course, I've got an idea, but I might be wrong. But there seems to be that issue. You see players coming from Africa, maybe having the same level of talent as a player from Europe, but the player from Europe seems to be valued more. I don't know if it's more experience, but whatever. If you've got more info on that, you can share with me. But that's a big factor. And there's also a factor of the region where a player is from. I'm going to explain this. Like, you look at goalkeepers now. I don't think a lot of people are very confident with dark-skinned African goalkeepers. Am I wrong? There are some people who will tell
You're
you,
right. You're right.
because we don't see a lot of them around, and just very few have succeeded. No disrespect. Of course, we have seen the likes of Vincent Inyama doing it big in the Europa League with Apoel in Israel, and he went to the French League. He did good, but there are not many of them. Not many of them. So if people want to get goalkeepers, they tend to look at Eastern Europe to get goalkeepers. So if a player is from that region, be like, oh yeah, it could be the next this person. It could be the next. The same way Man United thought Hoyland would be the next Haaland. And Atlanta placed a very high value on Haaland, and now we know it's just the Temu version of Haaland. If you understand what I mean. But yeah, the region the player comes from, it differs. Then there is propaganda in the media. Propaganda like
Mm,
PR as
mm,
well. Social media is key these days. You cannot do without social media, especially Twitter. I think Twitter is very underrated when it comes to how footballers are being are
Influential.
being are being
Yeah.
evaluated. You
yeah,
go
Yeah.
there are a few people who will just cook up some narratives, probably go on YouTube, develop some comps and put them out there. Then they start, and there's a whole lot of, I'll call them quacks when it comes to journalism. And
Yeah.
and
Media sites that
yeah,
take
and
quotes from Twitter,
yes, and they see and
and
they see
narratives.
themselves
Mm.
as I think they call themselves ITK. They see themselves as
yeah,
the kings of breaking transfer news. Some can just wake up
Mm.
in the morning and just say, "Oh, Bafemi Martins to sign for Barcelona tomorrow," and then because of their followership, everyone just stupidly follows whatever they are saying, or they build up a narrative about
yeah,
about a certain player. Like, I've got no disrespect for Hugo Ekitike, but I don't know why I'm seeing reports of him being worth 100 million. Why? Like, what has he done respectfully? Of course, you look at potential, you talk about contracts and everything, but I don't know why Ekitike is 100 million. These are some of the factors, and I think sometimes it's killing football. Some of these agendas, and we get to see the wrong players move to the wrong clubs. And don't forget, we need to go back to the history of football transfers. First of all, let's look at the fees. Before, club sides didn't used to pay much money for players. And we saw, maybe I'll just start from the Abramovich era in Chelsea, when he started bringing in big players. He went for Shevchenko, who the team didn't really need, got Balak, started pumping in money. And the likes of Sir Alex Ferguson, because he was a winner, he didn't want to be left behind. He tried to start spending, because Ferguson didn't used to spend much. But because he saw how Chelsea was moving, he was like, if I don't compete with these guys, I'll be left behind. And Ferguson started spending. And of course, there's someone like the professor himself, Arsene Wenger, who didn't want to spend. And he kept on saying it, stop spending too much on these guys because it's going to go crazy very soon. And here we are. Players going for hundreds of millions. Players who
Well, it all started from Neymar, Barcelona,
I know. I think. I
PSG,
think. I
go
think.
for 200 million.
Yeah.
Yes, so that's where the most
I know. I don't. I
overpriced,
don't. I don't even think it started from there. Bale moved before Neymar. Bale moved for 100
Well,
million, and
yeah,
Bale moved from Tottenham where he wasn't winning anything. He had a
but he
potential,
was
but that money, that
exactly.
that 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 was too much at that time. But nobody talked about it. We all thought, oh yeah, that's good. But we were actually setting a standard, and here we are.
But
Enzo
for
Fernandez
instance,
won the World Cup with Argentina. He didn't really play much for Benfica, and he moved for over 100 million.
but in defense to Gareth Bale's own, he left Tottenham in 2013, and he was the missing puzzle for Real Madrid when they started winning. And when Gareth Bale arrived, he single-handedly delivered Real Madrid the Copa del Rey, backing up his evaluation for whatever was paid for him. And the next season, Real Madrid won the Champions League, which started the trend, from 2014. So
But
he, in his
but the
defense, yes,
question the,
in
que- the
it,
question I would ask you is, before Gareth Bale, people were moving and winning things. So after the Gareth Bale moved, what happened was, oh, for you to win now, you need to pay the big money. And we saw journalists always saying,
Coutinho's
always
failed deal with
every
Barcelona.
every transfer window, it's almost like an anthem for journalists. They say,
Yeah,
well, you need two, three players, and you've got to spend 300 million. You've got to spend 500
yeah,
million for the football is more than that. You don't need that exactly. Of course, you need to boost your squad. You need to have some
yeah.
talented players, but you don't necessarily need to spend ridiculously. And of course,
And so,
Pep
in
Guardiola,
contrast, I was about to say that,
yeah.
like the way Pep has spent this summer, it has been a very good way of spending, buying three solid good players, and spending almost the same amount that Liverpool is paying for one player in Florian Wirtz. But
Let's get to that. Why is Florian Wirtz worth that amount of money these days? Like
Well,
why?
I think he is worth the amount if you're making it in comparison to every other player and how much they've been worth. Because if you're saying Benjamin Sesko, for instance, right now is worth 100 million, Florian Wirtz has been the best player in German league for the past 2 seasons, and he's been there's just a player that had an ACL injury and he came back and he picked up from where he left off, and he went, he has had a great season. And like I was about to make these points, saying it in Liverpool's defense, even though you can come as if, it's some sort of way of criticizing Liverpool. They've spent the highest money ever on a goalkeeper. They spent the highest money. They've broken the transfer record too on a defender, and they've broken the transfer record now on an attacker. But like I was about to say this, but in
Oh,
their
I
defense,
didn't know
they've
that.
gone,
That's
yeah.
true.
Yeah, Alisson is the most expensive
Yeah,
goalkeeper in
Van
Premier
Dyke.
League history. Van Dijk is the most expensive, but I would say that they've had a legacy. They've had a fantastic run of form, in the past year, couple of years when they've had these players.
Okay.
So I could make a case for Florian Wirtz that maybe he can go, to continue in that trend.
Yeah.
So,
I
but in
think.
other cases, sorry,
Yeah,
I was
go on.
just there, like in other cases where, you see a player in the present market with a huge price tag, and you, with the eye test that we know, do you understand? You say this person is not really worth this amount. Do you understand? But in Florian Wirtz's defense, that's what I'm saying. In the exaggerated price market that we have, I think he's worth the 150 million.
Okay, that's true. You made a good point. And yeah, Liverpool can come out and say we signed the most expensive defender and is arguably the greatest defender in the Premier League. We signed Alisson, most expensive goalkeeper, and is arguably one of the best goalkeepers. So they can defend that. But of course, I'm still of the opinion that you didn't need to pay that much. But we know it's the business now. Inflation globally has gone so high. Like it's
That's
on.
such.
Yeah, it's smoking something else right now. But some of these players are not really worth this amount. And let's go down to comparing in terms of regions. Some players from Africa who are very good, they don't really get that respect. Let's look at Victor Osimhen's saga. Journalists have posted or reported that Osimhen is asking for a lot of money, like his wage demands. It's too much for the European teams to pay. But we are seeing players who we know can't even lace Osimhen's boots earning more than that, and no one is complaining. With all due respect, Jack Grealish didn't really play much for Man City, and he was on like 300 on something, and no one complained. He got like how many goals? No one complained. So you look at it and you be like, what's happening?
And that's £100 million player.
Yeah. So is it that, and he's trying to move now, and I
Mhm.
think they're putting a 50 million pounds on him. For me, Jack Grealish is not worth 30 million pounds right now, based on
I
form.
think I think you should divide the 30 million by two. Then
The
no,
man,
but with his age too. Yeah, he's not young too. He's 29 if I'm not mistaken, right? Or 30.
yeah, 29.
So for a player that in his past 4 years at Man City, I think he has scored like 16 goals. If I don't think he's even had up to 16 goals.
Okay.
So for a winger, this was a ball carrier. This was the pride of Aston Villa. A player that they found as their jewel, but he wasn't built for Pep's system. He wasn't a systematic player. He's a player that probably would have thrived at a small club, but like we all said, he's from Europe, he's a British player. They put the big money on his head. They can afford to pay him without complaining. And when it comes to players like Osimhen, not just Osimhen, in Osimhen's case, it's quite funny because the club that was saying, one of the club allegedly, the Chelsea, that say that they cannot afford to pay his wages, that's the club that has been paying and buying players right there, left, right, and center, and giving contracts worth like 10 years, so so it's a narrative that I still don't understand why they created. But I think it also we all that the African region, the journalists in Africa, the media in Africa, the system in Africa also has a part to play. To play. Do you understand? Because if we had a good system and we had a way of evaluating our players without always waiting for them to go on international tournaments like the under 17, under 21 before they can place a value on them and hoping that they can get, a contract to any team in Europe, that would have been a good way of actually creating value around the players first before, they leave.
Okay.
But
Let's talk about the ripple effect of inflation because we're talking about inflation in the value of players, right?
Yeah.
What's the effect? To me, the persons on the receiving end, me and you, the fans,
the fans,
because you get to, as a club, you get to pay a lot of money to sign players, and when you sign the players, you expect to sell merchandise, right? Who's gonna buy them? The fans. I've made this example before. Back in the days, you used to see football teams, club sides, every season, maybe in 2 seasons, they'll have like a particular home kit and they change it after 2 seasons. But these days, every season you see a new kit, a new home kit, a new away kit, second away
new
kit,
sponsors
third
too.
away kit, and these things are not cheap. If you Arsenal fan, if you go to the Arsenal Armory and you see how much they sell things, it's very expensive, and the ticket fee keeps going up. The clubs they need to make their money back, and who is paying for this? The fans. So maybe at some point we should just be honest and say some of these guys are not really worth this thing. Just calm down sometimes. Paying a ridiculous amount of money for players who will come and not even perform properly. But maybe it's too late right now. Am I wrong?
I think it's too late.
It's too late. It's too late. The thing is, there's a whole lot. There's a whole lot in this. UEFA have also no help because they came up with a law, of financial fair play and all of that. But since this law came about, what have they done? How many clubs have been sanctioned? The few clubs that we've heard a few things about are actually the smaller or average clubs. But the bigger clubs who people feel are actually, doing things, doing certain things behind the scene. We're talking about Man City. Man City have a case of 115 count charges or thereabouts, but these guys have just spent about 400 million pounds from January to this moment, and nothing is happening. So, what are you doing, UEFA? What exactly? Who are those people that are guilty? I mean, you can't even talk about what PSG have spent in the last 5 years and all of that. So, what exactly is financial fair play? But we're seeing smaller clubs like Nottingham Forest, Everton getting hits by Premier League, and so we really, what exactly is financial fair play if you can't have a salary cap? You can't have, some of these clubs come up with some revenues, and those revenues are not very clear. Where did you get these revenues from? Because I don't know. I'm mentioning Man City. I don't have any issue against Man City, for example. But we've been watching Manchester City. We've seen Champions League. They hardly even fill their stadium. Lots of empty seats during Manchester City. And how many fans globally support
Where's the money
Manchester City?
coming
How many
from?
merchandise they even sell? So where is it coming from? But when you see their financial reports, their books are so well.
Bro.
Their books
They
are
have
so
the best
everything.
lawyers.
We serve a miracle working
Everything
God.
is everything is okay. So they are just so unstoppable. They keep signing. They keep every time. So you're just wondering, a club that didn't win, but already what they've spent so far. So that's one issue. Then about the African players, it's sad. It's a sad situation as an African, but there's just so a whole lot. Um, I'm not saying this to look down on our African brothers, but these European agents and clubs feel like you can trace almost everything about a European player from when he was born, the player's growth, the player's academy, the first day he stepped into his academy, the first day he kicks his ball, and all of that. So even if the player's talent is average, you have like a clear idea of who this person is all about. And if this person is 23 years old and you are signing this player, you are a bit comfortable with the fact that in the next 5 years, this player will be 28, I can still sell this player. There's a resale value or something like that. But that's not the case for an African player. There's this fear. There's this fear because I heard this from a journalist. There's this fear from an African player who is 23 years old. You are just so scared that this is not the case, right? This player is talented. You're sure this player is talented, but you can't trace anything about this player beyond this player's 2 years of playing in Europe. So you're not sure the player's age, you're not sure of the player's background, you're not sure of so many things about the player.
Wow.
So it becomes very difficult for
Yeah,
them to
yeah,
pay a huge buck, even if they genuinely know
yeah.
that this player's talent is as good as this other European player. It's
Do
a
you know
sad
what?
thing.
Andy,
It's not
Do you
something
know
that
why
you
I'm
like.
laughing?
I know why you're laughing, but be very careful with what you say. Anything you say may be used
No,
against you.
it is ever so. It is the way he packages the way he's in a very calm and soothing way.
My
At
brother,
least, you
I have
know,
to be I have to be careful.
the fear of
it
dragging
is
is the
it
beginning of
is it
wisdom.
yeah, the truth is it is a
Do you
sad
understand?
truth, right? And the
It's a
worst
sad
part
thing.
about the worst part about what he's saying is the stigma that it has. When you actually see players now that will be in the under 17 team and you know that there's a track record, maybe from their youth team, the academy that
Mm.
they started from, but still, just because there's already a premeditated fear of what has been, and it now
Exactly.
comes to affect what could be. So,
Well,
that's why
let's
I was laughing about
let's
the
calm
whole
down.
situation
You
because
know,
it's.
yeah, I think I would say this one to you off camera, but let's just talk about something in relation to data, because what we're talking about it revolves around data, and
Data, yeah.
I remember, yeah, if you know the popular journalist Elegbete, he talked about because he follows the Nigerian Premier League a lot, and he said we call ourselves. I'm using Nigeria as an example now because we are all Nigerians. Okay,
Yeah.
he talked about us Nigerians saying we are a footballing nation, but there's nothing to show for it. We don't really have good sports scientists. There's no data, and I can agree. There was a time I was following the NPFL keenly. I tried to get some details from some players, and not even the club's websites could provide those details. You know, when you go on transfer on Google, there's I've forgotten the name of that website. There's a website that has just like in MMA.
the
In MMA,
the
there's
player's
yes,
profile.
yes.
Yeah,
There's a
yeah,
website called
trans, yeah.
Topology for fighters. You just go there, you see when they started, their age, a lot of their record is there. For most
Mm.
MPFL players and most African players, you can't really get that, and
Nothing.
it's
You
not
can't trace
nice.
You
And
can't
anything.
those
even see the
yeah, and
picture.
those things affect your value. So we need to do our own bits too. But I mean, there's a whole lot of ground to cover. Let's talk about some managers being lazy, because I believe this whole thing about signing players, as soon as you have a bad season, the only way for you to fix your season is for you to go sign more players. Why can't you work with what you have? We've seen Luis Enrique, for instance. We know PSG were on a run before where they were just signing every Dick and Harry. But right now, Enrique gave them a Champions League, winning the final by 5 goals to 0 without a recognized centre forward, no recognized defensive midfielder. They managed to play as a team, and they've built something good. Real Madrid, like you mentioned, Handy, Real Madrid have done good with Ancelotti. With the injuries they had to Militao, a lot of ACL injuries, they managed to get some players like Chouameni to just, cope with the season. But the whole idea of fans wanting the club to just go in there, you need to break the bank, spend 200 million here, that doesn't really work, and it doesn't really show or speak well of the coach. You need to find a way to work with something. Work with what you've got. Introduce us to new players. That's your job, not just going to shop for players every day like you're going to Aldi to go buy stuff. Anyhow, Mr. Fairplay.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You talked about managers becoming a bit lazy. Like I have some instances here. I'll start with my own club, Arsenal, because I this is an issue that should spread around almost all the clubs. We had a period in the season where we had lots of injuries in the attack, and then we have a 19-year-old striker in the under 21 who was nominated as one of the players of the season. His name is Kyon Edwards. He didn't even get a minute. But we played a central midfielder in the attack and all of that. But we're saying, and everybody we're making it as an excuse. Oh, because of injuries, we could not sign a striker in January. But you could still go to the academy and pick one or two players there and see what they can do. Stars are made from difficult moments sometimes. What about
Like,
Chelsea? Chelsea have
Raul
like
Asensio.
23 players, like about 23 players on loan. But these guys keep signing 19, 18-year-old players, 21-year-old players with 8 years, 7 years contract. What are you people doing? What about Man City? Oh, the best manager in the world had a young 19-year-old Jamal Simpson Pussy in his team. They played a few games last season. But somehow he has gone ahead to sign two central defenders. One is 19, the other one is 20 years old. And the young Jamal is absolutely nowhere to be found. Like,
He was the
what
player
is
of the
happening?
season in
Why
the
you? He was a
academy, right?
player of the season, exactly.
In the Premier League too.
Was the player of the season and has tested first team football already. So why are you not developing that player instead of going all out to spend as much as 80 or 90 million pounds for two young centre backs of about the same age? So
And one hasn't
these
even
are
made
these
a
are
first appearance.
Okay, that's true. I think it's been a good conversation. I think maybe we'll have a part two of this another time because there seemed to be a lot more we could cover, but because of time, we just couldn't cover it. And yeah, guys.
one last thing go before we go, please, very briefly. I'll use an English Premier League for example. One of the reasons why players' valuation actually is as high as anything is because it's one of the most marketable leagues. They have money. Every single club in that league, even the relegated clubs, they have money. So sometimes when you come for their players, they are not desperate to sell. So if they must sell, you will have to break the bank. I mean, Aston Villa were not desperate to sell Jack Grealish, but Man City has to go as far as paying £100 million just to get the player. A player I really don't think they needed, but because they wanted to. So it is what it is. Not good, but
And
fortunately, it is what it is.
sometimes I think some clubs just sign some players so their rivals don't get them.
That too happens. Yeah.
Like,
So I have
That's
something to
another
say
point.
because of this thing you just said. Wow. So David Beckham actually released a video where he said that Barcelona had actually signed him in
yes,
2005,
that's true.
before he was about to leave Man U. But he said he always had a dream of playing for Real Madrid. So he asked for his agent to reach
Wow.
out to Real Madrid to know if they're interested. And the truth is Real Madrid signed him just to get at Barcelona.
So it doesn't go to
And that
wow.
changed the destiny of Ronaldinho because if Beckham would have been signed, then Barca wouldn't have signed Dinho, and Dinho
Sign
wouldn't have gone
Ronaldinho.
on to win the world, become the best player in the world for 2000. So, it happened. Real Madrid was doing it at that time, to hurt them, but it ended up biting us in the ass. So
Yeah,
yes,
Yes.
they did.
so it happens.
They did
Interesting.
dominate that
That's
time.
really interesting.
Well, yeah, that I think I watched that video. It was a good revelation. But thank you guys so much. I really enjoyed talking about this topic, valuation of players, and a lot more will come out. We'll get more information and possibly do another part another day. And it's been so nice, man. How good is it? We just did a podcast without insulting each other.
Because we're talking about the price and money of other people. So we
I,
are in alignment.
and also we
We're
know
in
we
sync.
know we know we can't really throw shades and banters too much because this guy had to come with a Real Madrid kit.
Come on, bro. Come on, bro. You know how many
We,
we're
we
talking
you
about.
know
Should I
Andy now.
mention it?
You
It's
know
the
Andy
15.
is always a step
Is
ahead of us when it
We're
comes
going
to
Apollo
trying
16
to
with
surprise
Alonso.
us with all of these
I,
things,
I,
trying to
I hope
intimidate me.
a
I
But
hope
good
it's
you
read.
guys
fine.
have been seeing the way my coach is. This when I watch the way my team trains, now I'm like,
Off
he participates in the
off
training.
your mic. Off your
Stop
mic.
playing. Alonso, Zabi ball time. Bro,
That's a pick. Can we end the session?
Bro, I'm going to delete this thing. I'll put Mickey Mouse in that place. Just bully. Get that badge out of my face, man. Aura, go. Take that in away. See this guy. All right. Thank you so much, guys. My name is Sasa P. I've had Handy, the Real Madrid bully, and I've had Mr. Fairplay, aka Eversam, or Eversam, aka Mr. Fairplay. However, but I think right
Yeah.
now, Mr. Fairplay will be your name moving forward. Let's clap for you.
It's fine by me because I like fair
Naming
play.
ceremony for you. Christianing. Okay, this is the Soft Sports podcast. Please make sure you subscribe to this channel if you haven't. You like, you share, you follow us on all our social media platforms. Right there, you can see it on the lower third, and you just engage with us, comment, and let's grow this family together. Okay, we talk sports every time, and it's what we love doing. All right, we'll see you guys later. Take care. Bye.